Among the larger projects undertaken was the implementation of voice recognition software in the radiology department.
Gosh, why don't we, we're spending X amount on the transcriptionists. Let's take a look at our report turnaround time in radiology for, $250,000 investment. Here's the returns. Not only are we going to save in terms of these contract transcriptionists, but we're also going to improve our report turnaround time. Some of the challenges really were, working with Dr. Miller and his team of radiologists was putting it out to Dr. Miller and saying, what do you think? Can we make this happen? There's resistance. But then I think also trying to put it into the context of, gosh, if we're successful getting this up and running, it leads us down the road of PACS.
The radiologists feared that it would add 25 to 40% extra work to their already busy days. It would potentially reduce their earning potential because time is money and they're reading exams. I'm sure they're worried. Of course, they care about the patient care and having an accurate report and an accurate diagnosis, and they want to spend their time looking at films. They don't want to spend their time playing with machines. Some of them are older physicians. They're computer shy. The ones that were computer literate realize how long it does take to play with a computer.
Steve wants PACS and wants us to get to that platform. So he knew that we had to take this step before we could even think about the PACS system.
Of the group of 12, we took 2 and decided that they would be the champions. One of them being the chair and another one being a radiologist who we felt had a good positive attitude about the project, someone that would bring problems to us but not broadcast them to the group.
However, the radiologist's displeasure remained a concern. At Maloney's behest, the support team had left the linear dictation machines in place, leading to fears by many team members that the radiologists would revolt and refuse to use the voice recognition software. But the revolution never materialized as the doctors became familiar with the new system.
Having it there, I was skeptical about leaving it there. I was all for putting it in a closet lock, and if we needed it, we could use it, but just take it away from them. But Alan was smart enough to realize that, you know what, it's a crutch, let them use it. Eventually they'll use it less and less, and I wasn't sure they would. And I think that people are really starting to lose faith in how she was going to work fairly with all of them. I thought it was really tending towards, like, whatever the doctors want is fine, everybody else will just jump to do it. But it ended up that they are the most important part. If they weren't going to cooperate, they would never get the system going, and none of us would ever get to the point we're at now.
Taken together, these projects, and many additional ones, helped the Ancillary Services Department lead Newton Wellesley down the road to fiscal recovery. All of those involved largely attribute the department's success to Maloney's leadership during this time.
So there you have, I just cut that short a little bit, kind of the getting toward the conclusion of the story, as you see, especially the last point, managing the physicians. Look at how it functioned there, getting buy-in from the very beginning. Whoops. I did that on purpose. Notice that, again, the buy-in was important. All of those things that you were just mentioning as items to implement, we noticed that we heard many of those things. How to manage different vendors, how to do the change management piece with the physicians. Who knew that if they left both options on the table, the new software versus the old dictation machine, that the physicians would actually try the newer one? But for some reason it worked. And the onus actually was on Ellen to communicate to her team and to others how they were going to do that. So in conclusion, what would you say are her key takeaways? What are your key takeaways from this story?
Good communications.
Be more specific, Paul. Between whom and how?
Between the people, between the physicians, her direct reports. And I don't know who else, but I mean, those are two of the big ones.
Yeah. Clear communications early and often. One of the things that often happens that I hear from people like yourselves, they say, okay, I've communicated a plan. But then what happens is maybe there's a sentinel event. And now suddenly it's like, well, what plan are we on now? Are we still on this plan or we changed course? So it's maintaining the let's stay the course mantra, right? That's not easy. Often easier said than done. Any other takeaways that you have?
She used 2 styles of
We have 2 here, 1 and then 2. A little louder.
It takes a village.
It takes a village. What do you mean by that?
Takes everybody's cooperation to make it work.
And easier said than done, basically. I mean, we could just say, okay, everybody, today let's be a village. But for some reason, people are fearful. It comes back to information. Information has to flow evenly. Yes?
Oh,
Two styles.
two styles. I forgot what I said. She used
I need to be quicker then.
the participatory with her direct reports, got their buy-in and participated with them, as well as she reached in and used her consulting background as well. So she had kind of a quasi-consultative as well as participatory leadership style during this period. Whereas her, the boss, they used the directive. This is what we got to do. So
Yeah. So she basically used many different styles. So thank you for that segue, perfect segue back to, remember a while ago I asked you, if you could hire one to run your unit, who would you have hired to run this outfit? Welch? Why is that? Just would have fired them all and brought in this team and say, hey, everybody, we're going to Massachusetts.
You got 4 weeks.
You got 4 weeks.
You know, I found interesting is that the expectation of her manager changed. So she didn't change. I mean, she obviously created a lot of change, but she was the same person she was before that happened. She was asked to do something differently. She stepped up and did it with the same people that was there before. It wasn't like they brought in a whole new people in the lab and radiology and all those places to do all that stuff. The expectation changed and she rose to the occasion.
But it was her approach. She made them feel important. She made
Absolutely.
them feel important.
That's right.
She challenged them.
She made them feel important. She challenged them, said, look, here it is on the table. Not unlike a story I'll tell you about St. Elizabeth's in Covington, Kentucky. I wonder if any one of you has worked there in the past. They had a similar situation, $22 million deficit that they had to overcome. They did it within a year. You know how? Just like this, they just opened their books. They opened the doors and they said, team, here's what it is. You can be you can be on the bus, you can be off the bus. If you're on the bus, this is what we need from all of you, and they did it, actually. So there's a great outcome there. So I heard one vote for Welch, and I like what you're saying here, and that is maybe it's the same person, but she tapped into different skill sets at different moments, because even though she was the same, the situation changed. Any other votes? Branson. Some of you want to see, I guess, this team in a plane, or I don't know. Send them all out to space. That's right. Hopefully they'll come back with the right medicine or something like that. I heard Branson, that adventurous, that style of thinking outside the box. I heard somebody else say Tovey, because
The hospital's like an orchestra.
yeah, it is an orchestra. Look at all the people actually in the different rows there, definitely. So again, the point made, there's not necessarily, and I maybe didn't make it clear earlier, not necessarily one leader for all seasons. It may be somebody tapping into different skills according to the environment, being nimble. So that's kind of where we conclude our story of the case study. What you've done is, again, we've walked through all of this. You've given us very specific suggestions on what to do. So in the future, when you feel like this is your day, the cracks in the foundation, and you want to know, how do I get from here to the on the right track? That's over here, next to the TV. Remember, this was the, oh, things feel great. There's cooperation, we're feeling productive, successful, it's fun. What's the right answer? How do you get from there to there? That's right. It's all those things that you've been mentioning. It's tap into that wheel. You know those things. Tap into these leadership styles. You know these things, but again, keep them handy because, of course, when we're frustrated, sometimes we forget these things. When we're so pressed for time. In addition, let me share with you some concluding best practices here. 10 lessons on leadership from Newton Wellesley. In fact, these some of you may have already read at the end of your case study, but some things to just remind you of. Leadership behaviors send powerful messages. That's the become the change I want to see that we heard from Gandhi at the beginning of our day. The imperatives of organizational fluency, setting clear expectations, follow through, the power of making the business case. Do you not, you don't have this page? I'm sorry. Then this is only a slide. Oh, do you have it? Okay. Page 99? Thank you. In the thickest book. I apologize. I just changed documents on you. So just FYI, these are some additional takeaways. The number 10, no waiting. What can I do today to lead change? And that's kind of where we conclude. In other words, today, what are the specific actions I can utilize to influence change to create urgency? That's a mistake. I apologize to you. I'll make sure you get the correct materials.
It's upside down.
But it's just upside down. Yes, I understand. I don't know why that happened. I apologize. Richard Branson. That's true. Let's blame one of those leaders over there. So our last section for the day, well, thank you for being patient for that part then. Our last section for the day is how then can you utilize the specific behaviors to be successful here? We started building that a moment ago. We're going back now to your toolkit. Keep your toolkit handy. Now you can put everything else aside. The toolkit, we're going to come back to how to refocus efforts for maximum effort. And you are going to build a plan. This is going to be your individual development plan, because what we did was we started marrying those competencies that will be required here at Upson in the future with your specific strengths, those things that will tend to fall into these quadrants. So what we're going to do is begin by looking at how do you leverage those strengths. In the past, there have been some leadership schools of thought that said, you know what, you should focus your time on your weaknesses. Well, actually, we're modifying that. We're saying, okay, we all have relative weaknesses. Every one of us, amongst those 15 competencies, we all have 5. So instead of focusing here, those are kind of the weaknesses, what we're saying is there are things we're really good at, and there are things that the hospital needs today. What we're going to do is not only continue to use them, but we're going to share them, talk about spreading the wealth and building a team. These adjoining areas, and by the way, I'm not going to go through all of the subsequent slides. I'm just going to kind of give you an overall sense of how we're going to develop these plans. The develop section, this is going to be a description of those areas that you're pretty good at. You may need a little bit of development, but these are things that are or will be important to the hospital in the future. So generally speaking, we're going to focus our attention in these 2 boxes. Redirecting, just FYI, I'll tell you what it means. This is the area of your current lower performance, where things are not necessarily so important to the hospital. A strategy may be redirect into areas to develop, or don't address these things. A similar strategy is true for those competencies for you that fell into the reserve area. A thought in this case may be, well, these are things that you're currently strong in, but the hospital doesn't necessarily need today. This is your ace in the hole. This is like, I'm pretty good at this. Let me keep an eye open as to when I could contribute this thing in the future. Or let me get myself into a position where I can utilize this because it's needed today. That's how to use your time wisely. The only mention I'll make at the moment, the lower right-hand quadrant, I'm going to say, well, not necessarily so important today, even though it may be a strength, not necessarily an area of focus. You may want to redefine it. That's all we'll say about that for the moment. So we're going to identify strengths, such as, let's say if mine was conflict prevention and management. To recognize your full potential, this is an opportunity for you to mentor and or train others. You're utilizing something that you're quite good at already. Being careful, though, to note those competencies that fall into the compensate area. What this means is important to the hospital, I'm not so good at it. That's what these things are. A strategy is to compensate. The only warning I'll give you at this moment, since we're not going to spend so much time on that today, is if you have kind of many things in this area, what it may demand of you is to rethink your role. Because you know what? It's saying, this is what's important to the hospital. Current performance, 14, 15, I'm not so good at it. If there are too many things in here I'm not so good at, I may need to be in a different role. That's the kind of question. If you have too many things in this area, or for those people that you coach. Seeking support from experts just basically means in those areas that you're either developing or compensating. There are some ways to get those skills. Either delegate the task to somebody else or partner with somebody who has those skills. Kind of straightforward. So that's what we're going to do, actually. What we're going to do on our next exercise is we're going to focus on these areas, developing, prioritizing, identifying behaviors with which we as individuals can move forward on. Now let me just jump ahead to, I'm just going to jump ahead here to the specific exercise that you are going to take on, and that is worksheet number 7. What I would like you to do here is list your top 3, if you have 3, in each of those areas that we just spent time on. Oh, okay, it's just page 8. Thank you. What I'd like you to do is list your competencies to leverage. In other words, where you plotted, just list your top 3. Maybe it was communicating effectively, initiative, giving feedback. Just list them. The same thing for those requiring compensation. Just list the top 2 or 3. And then those competencies to be developed. List those. And in each one of these segments, pick one that you could focus on if you had to pick one. So just take a few minutes to do that now. Jump ahead to page 10. It looks like this on the monitor. This is your individual action plan. Notice that we're focusing on the upper right-hand quadrant, or area of the grid. This is, remember, this is the area of your strengths plus Upson's future important competencies. So this is the best mix of your talents and what's needed tomorrow here. Write in your number 1 competency to focus on. The example given up here is identifying and recruiting top talent. And this is going to be your homework. We'll spend some time doing this here now. It should be pretty self-explanatory. After you list the one competency that you want to spend time on now, this is one of your strengths, just go through the next questions. Identify the behavioral strengths linked to it. So for identifying and recruiting top talent, what that means, one of the behaviors that goes with it is, trying to see where that one is. Oh, there it is, right. Selects best applicants for the job, accurately assesses skills of job applicants. Those are some specific behaviors linked to that competency. Write those in. Write in your personal development objective. How can I maximize this? Well, here it says, to maximize the value of my skill for the good of the hospital beyond my own department. So what are the effects of competency leverage? Time to fill vacancies. Lower turnover rates because of the higher caliber of talent. Improved performance for new staff because of the correct coaching match. Who are the beneficiaries? Well, human resources, nursing. So take a few minutes to do that for yourself now. Okay. Sure.
What did you have up there as under the personal development objective, and it was in parentheses? I couldn't read. Or, I don't know.
The box.
So, in this box. So this person says, identifying and recruiting top talent. My personal development objective is to maximize the value of my skill in identifying and recruiting top talent for the good of the hospital beyond my own department. So in other words, I'm going to figure out ways to share the wealth of this skill. Who am I going to coach? Who will I mentor? Of course, this is very subjective. Does that help you at all? Allow me to just share some reflections. Well, we're coming to the end of our day, and some of us are getting very happy over here. I understand that. That's okay. Some of you are, I don't know if I'd say struggling with this, but it takes a little reflection. Here's another way to look at it, because let's remember, this is a strength that you already have. Here are a couple of ways to look at it. One is, over time, I will need to maintain this as a strength, so how will I continue to stay sharp in this area? That's one way you can come up with a personal development objective. How will I maintain my own high accountability standards or my own high service orientation standards? So that's one way you can go. Another is, I'm good at it. How can I share this wealth? Well, my objective then is I am going to work with my team of nurses and share that. I'm going to work with my wellness team, whatever that is.
Your peers, or also with your direct reports, either way?
Good question. The question is, do I share it with my peers, my direct reports? Sorry to be vague here, Dennis. I'll be vague first, and then I'll be more specific. The vague answer is whoever is going to benefit, right? The more specific answer is, let's say there's a traditional coaching model, which is kind of boss and subordinate. So maybe it's you're coaching your subordinates, right? There's another model, and that is boss coaching people not in my direct line. So somebody, you shared with me, so who are the other groups that you're working with in wellness that you mentioned? So maybe some of those groups, maybe there's a cross-training opportunity there. So there's a bit of a general answer and a bit of a specific answer. So part of the answer to this development plan is linked to the flip chart we did on this side with Ellen at the center. Put yourself in the center. Think about who are all these constituent groups that you interact with, some more often, some less often. How often do you work with physicians? How often do you manage vendors? Do you work with the finance team? Which other departments? Do you have to report to the board? How about your peers, your supervisor, upward management? Sometimes there are strong relationships with subordinates, so much so that they can train their bosses in certain areas. I will hold myself accountable by doing the next specific action within a week of today. I will do the next thing within 1 month of today. This comes right back to kind of process management. So that exercise, in talking with your senior team, complete that first aspect of your development plan. That is leveraging your strengths, right? The second one is one that you can do after that. That is, and we're not going to do that now, that is you pick a competency in the develop area, and you go through the same process as you just did. How will I create a personal development objective? How will I hold myself accountable? But for the sake of this workshop, what is required of you is you submit what you've just worked on to your coach or your supervisor. Is that the right terminology that we have here? Okay. And to just summarize the dates, the expectation, so today is May 1st. Now, by the way, you don't have to change documents, but just know that the application handbook is a Reader's Digest version of what we just did, and you all have the application handbook handy. It's the summary of all our leaders, our 6 leaders. It's a summary of our discussion about the case study. It's a summary of our discussion about how do you create your own development plan. Just know that you have it. And it just happens that on page 7 of your application handbook, there's this timeline. But you can write these dates in anywhere. May 1st is today. It is expected of you to go online and there's a little online test after today. We request that you take it within a week while the information is still fresh. Here's how that works. You will automatically get an email prompt saying go to the website. You just click on the link that comes to your email box saying go to this site. And there's a 10-question, it's really a 10-question quiz. Things like one question may be, which of these quotes is true? And one might say, leaders are made rather than born. And there's a set of multiple choices. You click on the right one. You need to get 7 out of 10. You can take it multiple times. If you get a question wrong, it'll take you to a page in the application handbook that you can reread and just get the right answer. We're not trying to stump you. It's really just meant to be a short method for retaining the key lessons that we've spoken of today. We know that you're very busy, but many of your peers nationwide told us that we want a method for which to be accountable and to practice the things that we feel are most relevant. So for each of you, you probably had different pieces of today that may have been more helpful versus less helpful. One way to take that away beyond the classroom is, again, take that test before May 8th. That's a week from today. Within 2 months of today, which is basically July 1st, that's right, develop at least one competency. So in other words, do what you just set out to do. So carry through on that plan, the follow-up. We encourage you to share those plans with your supervisors. We encourage you to share them with your peers. Tell your peers what you're working on. They might be able to help you get to the end result that you're trying to achieve. So be open with that information. Then by September 1st, which is 4 months after today, do an assessment. How did I do? Did I do it? Did it help me as a leader? Did it not help me? Where should I refocus my efforts? Now, maybe in 4 months' time, I focus on the next competency. So that's for you to determine. So any questions about this? These may be hard to read. It says May 1st, May 8th, July 1st, September 1st. This one? It just says develop one competency. So that's what you're doing now. Yeah. I encourage you, you don't have to stop at 1. That's just kind of the formal homework assignment. It's on page 7 of the application handbook, correct. So we call it an application handbook. In other words, just how will I apply what I've learned today beyond the class?